The escape pod tumbled through the void like a broken toy, its hull scarred by plasma burns and micrometeorite impacts. Inside, Captain Zara Vex-9 of the Kalrani Republic pressed her scaled hands against the cracked viewport, watching her homeworld shrink to a pale blue dot. The emergency beacon had been broadcasting for 3 standard days now, but no Kalrani ships would come. They had made that perfectly clear. Traitor, she whispered to herself, tasting the bitter word. It rolled off her forked tongue like poison. The Council of Scales had branded her with that mark, stripping away her rank, her citizenship, even her name suffix that marked her as nobility. Now she was just Zara, drifting in a coffin of metal and regret. The pod systems wheezed and sparked around her. Life support was failing, the recycler coughing out stale air that tasted of burnt electronics. She had maybe 6 hours before the carbon dioxide scrubbers gave out completely. 6 hours to contemplate how saving a human colony had cost her everything she had ever known. Her reflection stared back from the viewport, violet skin mottled with stress patterns, her crest fins drooping with exhaustion. The ceremonial scars on her cheekbones, marks of her warrior caste, seemed to mock her now. What good was honor when your own people called you diseased? The memory burned fresh in her mind. The human settlement on Kepler 442b had been an easy target. 3,000 colonists, mostly families with nothing but agricultural equipment and hope. The Kalrani fleet had surrounded the planet like predators circling wounded prey. Standard extermination protocol. No survivors, no witnesses, no mercy. But when Zara had looked down at those sprawling farms and small towns through her battlecruiser's targeting scope, something had broken inside her. Children played in those streets. Families tended gardens under an alien sun. They weren't warriors or conquerors. They were just trying to live. She had tried reasoning with Admiral Kess Prime first. They pose no military threat, she had argued in the War Council. Their technology is centuries behind ours. We could simply relocate them. The Admiral's gill slits had flared with contempt. Humans are a plague, Captain. They spread and consume and corrupt everything they touch. The High Command's directive is clear. Total elimination. When Zara had transmitted the evacuation warning to the human colony instead of opening fire, her own fleet had turned their weapons on her. 18 ships against 1. She had managed to damage 3 of them before her cruiser's shields failed. But in the end, she could only watch helplessly as the orbital bombardment began. The humans had named their settlement New Eden. By the time Zara's escape pod cleared the planet's gravity well, New Eden was a crater of glass and ash. A proximity alarm jolted her from the memory. Something was approaching, a ship running silent and dark. Zara's heart raced as she powered up the pod's passive sensors. The vessel was massive, easily twice the size of a Kalrani dreadnought, but its design was unfamiliar. Smooth curves instead of the sharp angles her people favored, and strange energy signatures that made her instruments flicker with confusion. The ship's hull bore scorch marks and battle damage. Weapon ports gaped like wounds along its flanks, and entire sections seemed to have been patched with salvaged materials. This was a warship that had seen hard fighting, but against whom? A communication beam lanced out from the vessel, bypassing her pod's encryption like it was tissue paper. When the transmission resolved, Zara found herself staring at a face that made her breath catch in her throat. Human. Definitely human, though unlike any she had seen in the tactical briefings. This one was older, weathered by time and conflict. Scars crisscrossed his dark skin, and his eyes held a depth of pain that Zara recognized in her own reflection. Gray streaked his close-cropped hair, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had lost everything and kept fighting anyway. Kalrani vessel. This is Captain Marcus Chen of the UES Defiance. Your pod is venting atmosphere and your life support is critical. We're bringing you aboard. Zara's training screamed at her to refuse, to trigger the pod's self-destruct rather than be captured by the enemy. But as she looked at the human's face on her screen, she saw something that stopped her cold. There was no hatred there, no desire for revenge, just tired compassion and the kind of resolve that came from facing impossible odds. You are human, she managed to say, her voice hoarse from breathing recycled air. And you're Kalrani, Chen replied simply. Doesn't change the fact that you're about to die if we don't get you medical attention. Your atmospheric mix is off by 3%, and you've got radiation poisoning from whatever battle you escaped. My people, they would not extend such courtesy to yours. The human's expression didn't change. I'm not your people. The docking bay that swallowed her escape pod was cavernous, filled with other small craft in various states of repair. As the bay pressurized, Zara caught glimpses through her viewport of figures moving in the shadows. Humans, yes, but also others. Species she didn't recognize, and some she did. A towering hegemony trooper worked alongside a delicate ethereal, their natural enemies united by some common cause. When the pod's hatch cycled open, Zara expected restraints, weapons, interrogation. Instead, she found a young human woman in medical whites holding a scanner and wearing a concerned expression. "Easy there," the medic said as Zara stumbled out on unsteady legs. "You've been breathing poison for days. Let's get you to medical and sort you out." As they helped her through corridors that hummed with purpose and determination, Zara caught sight of memorial walls, thousands of names etched in metal, human and alien alike. The ship was a graveyard of losses, but somehow it still lived, still fought. She was a traitor to her own kind, forsaken and alone. But perhaps in this unlikely place among these unlikely allies, she might find something her people had never offered her, a chance to be more than what she was born to be. The human medic caught her staring at the memorial walls. "Everyone here lost something to the war," she explained softly. "But Captain Chen says loss doesn't define us. What we do with what's left does." Zara nodded, understanding beginning to dawn in her weary mind. She had lost everything, yes, but maybe that meant she was finally free to choose what she would become. The medical bay of the UES Defiance looked nothing like the sterile white chambers aboard Kalrani vessels. Here, jury-rigged equipment hummed alongside salvaged alien technology, and the walls bore the warm amber glow of human lighting mixed with the cool blues and greens favored by other species. Dr. Sarah Kim worked with practiced efficiency, her scanner revealing the full extent of Zara's injuries. Radiation poisoning, atmospheric toxicity, and you've got stress fractures in your lower ribs, Dr. Kim announced, her tone clinical but not unkind. "When did you last eat?" Zara tried to remember. Time had blurred together in the escape pod. 4 days, perhaps 5. "Right. We'll start with a metabolic stabilizer and work from there." The doctor prepared an injection, then paused. "I should warn you, this is human medicine. Our biochemistry is different from yours, but we've had to learn to adapt treatments for other species. It might feel strange." The injection sent warmth flooding through Zara's system, followed by a curious tingling sensation. Almost immediately, her vision sharpened and the constant ache in her joints began to fade. She stared at Dr. Kim in amazement. "How do you know Kalrani physiology?" Dr. Kim's expression grew distant. "We've had prisoners before, and refugees." She sealed the injector and set it aside. "Not many of either, if I'm being honest. Your people preferred death to capture. As we are taught." Zara flexed her fingers, marveling at how the pain had receded. "Capture means interrogation, torture, eventual execution. Better to die with honor intact." "Honor's a funny thing," Dr. Kim mused as she checked Zara's vital signs. "Seems to mean different things to different people. Captain Chen might have some thoughts on that." Before Zara could respond, the medical bay doors slid open and Captain Chen himself entered. Up close, he was even more imposing than he had appeared on the comm screen. Tall and broad-shouldered, with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to command, but his eyes held depths of weariness that spoke of too many hard decisions and harder losses. "Doctor, how is our guest?" "She'll live," Dr. Kim replied, "though she needs proper nutrition and rest. The radiation exposure wasn't severe, but combined with everything else." "Understood." Chen turned to Zara, studying her with an intensity that made her crest fins twitch nervously. "I'm curious about something, Captain Vex 9. Yes, we know who you are. The question is, what were you doing in an escape pod in Terran space?" Zara straightened despite her exhaustion. Even stripped of rank and citizenship, she would not cower before anyone. "I am no longer captain of anything. Your intelligence is outdated. Humor me." The story came out haltingly at first, then in a rush as the memories overwhelmed her usual reserve. She told them about New Eden, about her refusal to fire on civilians, about the court-martial that had branded her a traitor. Chen listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When she finished, silence filled the medical bay like a held breath. Dr. Kim had stopped her work to listen, and now both humans stared at Zara with something she couldn't quite identify. 3,000 people, Chen said finally. The bombardment was thorough. Zara's voice caught slightly. I transmitted the evacuation warning, but there was insufficient time. Perhaps a few hundred escaped to the outer settlements, but the primary colony? We know. Chen's words were quietly devastating. We picked up the survivors, mostly children whose parents put them on the last transport out. They're safe now aboard one of our hospital ships. Zara felt something crack inside her chest. They survived? Some of them. Thanks to your warning. Chen moved closer, his presence somehow both threatening and reassuring. You saved nearly 800 lives at the cost of everything you had. Why? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Zara found herself thinking of her youth on Calran Prime, of the propaganda vids that painted humans as monsters, of the training that emphasized their alien nature and inherent threat to galactic order. But she also thought of the colony she had observed through her targeting scope. Children playing, families working together, the simple rhythm of life trying to take root under a foreign sun. They were not soldiers, she said simply. They had no weapons, no defenses. It would have been murder. Chen nodded slowly. And for that your own people cast you out. The Calrani do not suffer weakness. Mercy is weakness. Compassion is disease. Zara's gill slits fluttered with remembered pain. I am contaminated by human influence, they said. A carrier of the plague of sympathy. Jesus, Dr. Kim muttered under her breath. There's something else, Chen continued. Your escape pod was transmitting on emergency frequencies for 3 days. Calrani ships were in the area, a patrol squadron according to our sensors. They ignored your distress calls. The words hit Zara like physical blows. She had known intellectually that her people had abandoned her. But to hear it confirmed so plainly, to know that ships of her former fleet had detected her dying pod and simply moved on. They have written me from existence, she whispered. In their records I am already dead. Well, you're not dead yet, Chen said firmly. Question is, what do you want to do about it? Zara looked up at him confused. I do not understand. You have a choice. We can drop you at a neutral port somewhere. Give you enough credits to start over on some frontier world where nobody knows your name or your species. Live quietly, try to forget. Chen paused, his eyes never leaving hers. Or you can stay. Stay? The concept seemed impossible. I am Calrani. My people are your enemies. Your people threw you away like garbage for doing the right thing, Dr. Kim interjected hotly. Seems to me that makes you exactly the kind of person we need. Chen held up a hand to quiet the doctor, but his expression suggested he agreed with her sentiment. The Defiance is home to refugees, outcasts, and anyone else who believes that maybe there's a better way to fight this war than slaughtering innocents. We've got hegemony deserters, ethereal pacifists, even a few void hunters who got tired of the endless killing. You would trust me, after everything my people have done? Trust is earned, Chen said simply. But everyone starts somewhere. The question is whether you're willing to earn it. Zara thought of her cramped quarters aboard Calrani ships, where every moment was scheduled and every action monitored for signs of ideological contamination. She thought of the rigid hierarchy that measured worth only in obedience and martial prowess. Then she looked around the medical bay, where alien technology worked alongside human innovation, where a doctor had treated her injuries without question or judgment. What would you have me do? Chen smiled for the first time since entering the medical bay, and the expression transformed his weathered features. Same thing we all do. Fight for something better than what we left behind. Through the medical bay's viewports, Zara could see stars wheeling past as the Defiance moved through space with purpose and determination. Somewhere out there, the war raged on between her former people and these humans who had shown her kindness. Somewhere out there, refugee ships carried the survivors of New Eden to safety. She had lost everything, her rank, her people, her identity. But perhaps among these unlikely allies she might find something worth building in the ruins of what she had been. I will stay, she said quietly. But I know nothing of your ways, your customs. I will be lost. Dr. Kim grinned and patted her shoulder with surprising gentleness. Don't worry. We're all lost here. That's what makes us family. 3 weeks aboard the Defiance had taught Zara that human ships were nothing like the orderly vessels of her former people. Where Calrani ships hummed with quiet efficiency and rigid protocol, the Defiance buzzed with constant activity, improvisation, and what humans called creative problem-solving. She was beginning to understand that this was simply another way of saying, making things work despite all logic and proper procedure. Her quarters were modest, but comfortable, shared with Keiko Tanaka, a former Earth Defense Force engineer who had lost her entire family in the siege of Luna. Their conversations were initially awkward, two warriors from opposite sides of a galactic war, trying to find common ground in a space barely large enough for two bunks and a shared desk. "You don't have to stand at attention every time I enter the room," Keiko had said after the first week. "We're not military here. Not exactly." "Then what are we?" Zara had asked, genuinely confused. "Survivors, I guess. People trying to do better than the governments that sent us to kill each other." The ship's social dynamics fascinated and bewildered Zara in equal measure. Species that had been bitter enemies for centuries worked side by side. Commander Voss, a massive hegemony trooper whose people had glassed 3 human colonies, spent his days helping Lieutenant Martinez maintain the ship's defensive systems. Dr. Yuthara, an ethereal whose crystalline form should have been dedicated to their species' pursuit of pure logic, worked in the hydroponics bay growing food with an almost maternal care. But it was the humans who truly puzzled her. They seemed to carry their losses like sacred wounds, transforming pain into purpose with a resilience that defied everything she had been taught about their species. Captain Chen exemplified this quality. She had learned that he had lost his wife and daughter in the early days of the war, yet he spoke of the future with unwavering determination. "You're thinking too hard again," Keiko observed from her workstation. They were in Engineering Bay 3, where Zara had been assigned to help with basic maintenance. Her Kalrani military training included technical skills, though human technology required significant adjustment. "I am attempting to understand the logic of this ship," Zara replied, carefully calibrating a power coupling. "Your people work with species that have killed millions of humans. My people would call this madness." "Maybe it is," Keiko shrugged. "But madness is working pretty well for us so far." A proximity alarm echoed through the ship, followed by Captain Chen's voice over the intercom. "All hands, we have a situation. Distress call from a civilian transport. All senior staff to the bridge." Zara looked questioningly at Keiko, who was already grabbing her tools. "Senior staff?" "Everyone who can think and isn't currently keeping the reactor from exploding," Keiko explained. "Come on, you're part of the crew now, whether you realize it or not." The bridge of the Defiance was a study in organized chaos. Multiple species worked at stations designed for humans, with countless modifications and jury-rigged interfaces. Captain Chen stood at the center of it all, studying a holographic display that showed a small vessel tumbling through space. "Report," Chen called as the senior staff assembled. Lieutenant Commander Santos, the ship's tactical officer, gestured to the display. "Civilian transport. Registration shows it as the merchant vessel Star's Promise. Their venting atmosphere and their engines are dead. 23 life signs aboard." "Cause?" Chen asked. "Looks like they ran into a Kalrani patrol," Santos replied grimly. "Weapons scarring consistent with plasma cannon damage. They must have jumped to hyperspace damaged and emergency dropped here when their drive failed." Zara felt every eye on the bridge turned to her. The weight of their stares was familiar. The same look her own people had given her during her court-martial, but where her fellow Kalrani had looked at her with disgust and disappointment, these beings looked at her with something else. Not accusation, but evaluation. "Kalrani don't usually leave survivors," Commander Voss rumbled, his synthesized voice carrying undertones of confusion. "They do if the ship jumps before they can finish the job," Chen replied. "Or if someone warned them to run." He looked directly at Zara. "What's your assessment?" The question hit her like a physical blow. He was asking for her professional opinion about an attack by her former people. The rational part of her mind noted that this was a test, not of her loyalty, which was still unproven, but of her willingness to contribute to the ship's mission. She studied the tactical display, noting the pattern of damage on the merchant vessel. "The plasma scoring is focused on engines and communications," she said slowly. "This is harassment pattern Delta 7, designed to disable, not destroy. They wanted to board the vessel." "For what purpose?" Dr. Yuthara's musical voice chimed from her station. Zara's blood chilled as understanding dawned. Slave-taking. The ship registry shows it as carrying agricultural specialists and their families. The Calrani have been experiencing labor shortages in the outer colonies. Silence fell over the bridge like a shroud. Even for beings accustomed to the horrors of war, the casual evil of slavery struck deep. "How long before that ship loses life support?" Chen asked quietly. 40 minutes, maybe less." Dr. Kim's voice came over the comm from the medical bay where she was monitoring the readings. "Time to intercept?" 38 minutes at maximum burn, Santos reported. "Do it." Chen's voice brooked no argument. "All departments prepare for emergency rescue operations. Medical, prep for incoming casualties. Engineering, I want every shuttlecraft ready for evacuation runs." "Captain," Commander Voss interjected, "our patrol schedule has us in Sector 7 in 6 hours. If we deviate now..." "There are 23 people dying out there," Chen cut him off. "The patrol can wait." As the bridge erupted into controlled activity, Zara found herself watching the humans with growing amazement. These were the monsters her people had described. The soulless predators who spread across the galaxy like a plague. She saw Dr. Kim coordinating medical teams, Lieutenant Martinez rerouting power to the engines, Santos plotting the most efficient rescue trajectory. Every action was focused on saving lives of people they had never met from a species that wasn't their own. "You look surprised," Captain Chen said, appearing beside her as the Defiance accelerated toward the dying ship. "My people taught me that humans only help their own kind," Zara said quietly. "That your compassion was a weakness that extended only to yourselves." "Maybe that was true once," Chen replied. "Before the war, we were pretty insular, afraid of anything different. But funny thing about being pushed to the edge of extinction, it teaches you to value life wherever you find it." Through the bridge viewports, Zara could see the star's promise growing larger, its hull blackened and twisted by Calrani weapons. Soon, shuttlecraft would launch from the Defiance, carrying human and alien rescue teams to save people who might never see another sunrise. "There is something I must tell you," Zara said suddenly, "about Calrani patrol patterns in this sector. If we are detected here..." Chen turned to face her fully. "Go on." "There is a destroyer squadron that sweeps this area every 72 hours. They are due to return in approximately 6 hours. If they find the Defiance here assisting civilians their forces attacked..." She swallowed hard. "They will not simply open fire. They will call for reinforcements. You could face an entire battle group. Are you suggesting we abandon those people?" The question hung in the air between them. Zara thought of her training, of the cold logic that had governed her life for so long. The smart tactical decision was obvious. 23 lives weighed, against the hundreds aboard the Defiance and the thousands they might save in future operations. But she also thought of New Eden burning under orbital bombardment, of children whose only crime was existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. "No," she said firmly. "I am suggesting that we work faster." Chen smiled, and for the first time, since joining the ship, Zara felt something she hadn't experienced in months, the sense of belonging somewhere, of being part of something larger than herself. "All right, people," Chen called to the bridge crew. "You heard the lady. Let's save some lives and get out of here before the bad guys show up." As rescue shuttles launched into the void, Zara realized that she was no longer watching the humans work. She was working with them, her knowledge and skills adding to their efforts. For the first time since her escape pod had tumbled away from Calran space, she felt useful again. More than that, she felt hope. The rescue had been successful beyond anyone's expectations. All 23 survivors from the Star's Promise were now aboard the Defiance, receiving medical attention and temporary quarters. But as Zara had predicted, success came with a price. Long-range sensors had detected the approaching Calrani destroyer squadron, and they were moving faster than anticipated. 4 ships, Lieutenant Commander Santos reported from the tactical station. Heavy destroyer Relentless Wind leading with 3 escort frigates. "They'll be in sensor range in 90 minutes. Captain Chen studied the tactical display with the calm focus that Zara had come to recognize as his signature under pressure.
"Can we outrun them?"
"Not with our current engine configuration," Chief Engineer Park replied over the comm. The rescue operation pushed our hyperdrive beyond safe parameters. We need at least 3 hours for proper cooldown and recalibration. Zara felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Her intelligence had helped save 23 lives, but it might have doomed hundreds more. She watched the bridge crew working through their options, noting the absence of panic or recrimination. These humans faced impossible odds with the same steady determination they brought to everything else. Options? Chen asked the room. We could scatter the fleet, Commander Voss suggested. Divide into smaller groups, make them choose which targets to pursue. That leaves our refugees vulnerable, Dr. Kim interjected from her station. The Star's Promise survivors aren't ready for another emergency jump. We could try the Razorback Nebula, Lieutenant Martinez offered. Dense enough to hide in, but the radiation would be hell on our systems. Zara listened to the tactical discussion with growing understanding. Every option they considered prioritized the safety of the civilians they had rescued. The crew's own survival seemed secondary to their responsibility for those under their protection. It was the kind of thinking that would have earned court-martial charges in the Kalrani military, where mission objectives always took precedence over individual lives. There is another option, she said quietly. The bridge fell silent. Chen turned to her with raised eyebrows. Go on. The destroyer squadron will be commanded by Captain Thek 7, Zara continued, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was suggesting. I served under him during the Proxima campaign. He is methodical, predictable. If I were to transmit a surrender offer... Absolutely not, Chen cut her off. We don't trade lives here. You misunderstand, Zara replied. Not surrender, a negotiation. Kalrani military protocol requires accepting formal parley requests from former officers, even those branded as traitors. It would buy you time to escape with the civilians. The bridge erupted in voices as crew members voiced their objections. Through the chaos, Zara heard fragments of argument. Suicide mission. We don't abandon our own. There has to be another way. The vehemence of their rejection surprised her. These people had known her for less than a month, yet they spoke of her with the same protective instinct they showed for their longtime crewmates. Quiet. Chen's voice cut through the noise like a blade. When silence returned, he looked directly at Zara. Explain your plan. All of it. Zara straightened, falling back on her military training to organize her thoughts. Captain Thek 7 commands by the book. When I transmit a formal challenge, he will be required to acknowledge it and grant standard diplomatic courtesy. 1 hour for preliminary discussion. During that time, his ships will maintain position and will not fire on any vessel not directly threatening them. And after that hour, Santos asked grimly, then he will order my execution and destroy any ship that harbors me, Zara admitted. But by then you could be 3 systems away. What about you? Keiko's voice was tight with emotion. Zara met her roommate's eyes, seeing pain there that reminded her uncomfortably of losing her own squad mates in battle. I will face judgment for my crimes, as it should be. Like hell, Chen said flatly. We're not sacrificing anyone. There's got to be another way. Captain, Zara said formally, with respect, there is no other way. You cannot outrun 4 destroyers with damaged engines. You cannot outfight them with a single ship. And you will not abandon the civilians you rescued. This is the only option that saves everyone who matters. You matter, Dr. Kim said fiercely from her station. Every life on this ship matters. The conviction in the doctor's voice made Zara's throat tight with unexpected emotion. When had she last heard anyone speak about her life as something valuable? Her own people had cast her out like refuse, erasing her from their records and their memories. But these strangers, these humans and aliens who had every reason to distrust her, spoke of her worth as though it were self-evident. I appreciate your sentiment, she said carefully, but this is logic, not emotion. The needs of many outweigh... Don't quote Vulcan philosophy at me, Chen interrupted with a slight smile. This is my ship and nobody gets left behind, period. Then what do you propose? Zara asked, frustration creeping into her voice. Chen was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the tactical display where 4 Kalrani ships approached like harbingers of doom. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of command and absolute certainty. We do this together. You make your parley request, but not from an escape pod. You do it from the bridge of the Defiance as part of our crew. We negotiate in good faith, try to find a peaceful solution. And if negotiation fails, then we fight, Chen said simply. All of us together. Zara stared at him in amazement. You would risk your entire ship for one Kalrani trader? I'd risk this ship for one refugee child, Chen replied. For one injured trader. For one person who needs our help. That's what we do here. We protect people who can't protect themselves. And right now that includes you. Around the bridge, Zara saw nods of agreement from the mixed crew of humans and aliens. Commander Voss, whose people had been enemies of humanity for decades, stood ready to fight alongside them. Dr. Yathara, whose crystalline body housed one of the most sophisticated minds in known space, had dedicated herself to growing food for refugees. Lieutenant Martinez, who had lost his home colony to ethereal orbital bombardment, worked daily beside former enemies. They were all here for the same reason. They had chosen to be something better than what their species demanded. They had found family among former enemies and hope in the aftermath of loss. Incoming transmission, Santos announced. The Kalrani squadron is hailing us. Put it through, Chen ordered. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of a Kalrani destroyer. Captain Thek 7 stood at its center, his violet skin marked with the deep scarification that indicated a career spent in combat command. His cold yellow eyes swept the bridge of the Defiance, cataloging threats and weaknesses with predatory efficiency. Human vessel. You are harboring a known traitor to the Kalrani Republic. Surrender Captain Zara of X9 immediately, and we may consider allowing your ship to depart intact. Zara stepped forward, moving to stand beside Captain Chen. She felt the weight of her former people's judgment, the familiar sting of their contempt. But she also felt the presence of her new crewmates at her back, their solidarity a warmth she had never expected to experience again. Captain Thek 7, she said formally, I invoke the right of formal parley under Military Code 77 Alpha. I request 1 hour for negotiation regarding the terms of my surrender. Thek 7's gill slits flared with surprise, then narrowed with suspicion. You dare invoke military protocol after your betrayal? I invoke the rights granted to any former officer of the Republic, Zara replied steadily. Rights that supersede political considerations. For a long moment, the Kalrani captain stared at her through the view screen. Zara could almost see him weighing options, consulting regulations, calculating political ramifications. Finally, he spoke. 1 hour, he said curtly. Then justice will be served. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Chen looked at Zara with something approaching admiration. Now what? He asked. Now we see if humans are as good at impossible solutions as they claim to be, Zara replied, surprised to find herself almost smiling. The war room aboard the Defiance had been hastily converted from a storage bay, but it served its purpose. Captain Chen sat at the head of a makeshift table, surrounded by his senior staff and several of the rescued civilians who had insisted on participating in their own defense. At his right sat Zara, her violet skin pale with stress but her posture resolute. 47 minutes remaining, Lieutenant Commander Santos announced, checking his chronometer. All right, Chen said, spreading tactical displays across the table. Let's assume diplomacy fails. What are we working with? The assessment was grim. The Defiance mounted respectable defensive systems and a handful of offensive weapons. But against 4 Kalrani warships, it would be like bringing a knife to a gunfight. The rescued civilians included engineers and technicians, but most were farmers and families with no combat experience. We have one advantage, Zara said quietly. Captain Thek 7's tactical preferences. He favors the hammer formation, destroyers attacking from multiple vectors while frigates provide covering fire. He will expect us to run or fight conventionally. So we do neither, Chen replied. What would he least expect? Zara considered the question, thinking back to her years serving under Thek 7's command. He was a competent officer but rigid in his thinking. Victory came through overwhelming force and perfect execution of established tactics. He would least expect us to attack, she said finally, especially not with a damaged civilian vessel. Chief Engineer Park looked up from her tablet. The hyperdrive coolant system has some interesting properties. If we dump it into the main deflector array, you want to turn our ship into a giant flashbang? Lieutenant Martinez asked incredulously. Something like that. The electromagnetic pulse would temporarily blind their sensors and overload their targeting systems. But it would also fry most of our own electronics. Dr. Kim leaned forward. How temporarily? Maybe 3 minutes. Maybe 30 seconds. Depends on their shield harmonics and how much coolant we're willing to sacrifice. Chen studied the faces around the table. These people had already lost so much. Homes, families, entire worlds. Now they were contemplating a plan that had maybe a 10% chance of success and a 90% chance of spectacular death. Vote, he said simply. All in favor of fighting? Every hand went up without hesitation. Even the civilians voted to fight, though they had every right to demand safe passage away from the conflict. Zara felt something twist in her chest. Pride, maybe, or recognition of a courage she had never seen among her own people. Motion carries, Chen said with a slight smile. Chief Park, how long do you need to rig the deflector array? 20 minutes, assuming I don't blow us up in the process. Santos, plot a ramming course for the lead destroyer. Martinez, reroute all available power to forward shields. Dr. Kim, secure all patients and prepare for battle conditions. As the crew dispersed to their tasks, Zara found herself alone with Captain Chen. The human studied her with those knowing eyes that seemed to see through all pretense. Having second thoughts? He asked. Many, Zara admitted. Your plan has numerous flaws. The electromagnetic pulse may not be sufficient to blind their sensors. Even if it works, we lack the firepower to disable 4 ships before they recover. And Thek 7 will not make the same mistake twice. So why are you still here? The question caught her off guard. Why was she here? She could have insisted on the original plan. Surrender herself and let the Defiance escape. It would have been logical, efficient, and ultimately futile, since Thek 7 would likely destroy them anyway once he had what he wanted. Because, she said slowly, I have never been part of something worth dying for. Chen nodded as though her answer made perfect sense. Welcome to the human condition. We're always finding new things worth dying for, usually at the worst possible times. An alert chimed from the bridge communications. Santos's voice followed. Captain, incoming transmission from the Kalrani squadron. They returned to the bridge to find Captain Thek 7 on the main screen. His expression as cold and unforgiving as space itself. Behind him, Zara could see the bridge of the relentless wind, a place she had once called home, surrounded by beings she had once called brothers. Time grows short, traitor, Thek 7 said without preamble. Present yourself for judgment or watch your new allies burn. Zara stepped forward, drawing herself up to her full height. I have a counter-proposal, Captain. Single combat, winner take all. The Kalrani captain's gill slits flared with surprise, then amusement. You challenge me to personal combat? You are no longer Kalrani. You have no right to invoke the ancient codes. I invoke them not as Kalrani, but as a being seeking justice, Zara replied. You accuse me of betraying our people. I say I acted to preserve honor in the face of dishonor. Let the ancestors judge between us. Murmurs rippled across the Kalrani bridge as crew members absorbed the implications. Single combat was an ancient tradition, rarely invoked in modern warfare but still legally binding under military law. If Thek 7 accepted, it would prevent him from simply destroying the Defiance out of hand. And if you lose? Thek 7 asked. Then I accept judgment and execution. But if I win, the Defiance and all aboard her go free. Captain Chen grabbed her arm. Zara, what are you doing? Buying time, she whispered back. And giving us one more option. Thek 7 considered the proposal with visible calculation. Refusing would make him appear weak before his crew. But accepting meant risking political complications if Zara somehow prevailed. Very well, he said finally. But the combat will take place aboard my ship, under our law and our customs. You will transport alone and unarmed. Agreed. Zara, no. Dr. Kim protested from her station. This is suicide. Perhaps, Zara replied. But it is my choice to make. She turned to face the mixed crew of the Defiance. Humans who had welcomed her despite being their enemy. Aliens who had accepted her despite her people's crimes. Refugees who had trusted her despite having every reason for suspicion. These beings had shown her something she had never experienced among her own kind. The possibility of belonging somewhere not because of what she was born as, but because of what she chose to become. If I do not return, she said quietly, remember that not all Kalrani are monsters. Some of us are simply lost. You're not lost, Keiko said fiercely. You're home. The words hit Zara like a physical blow, bringing tears to her eyes that she quickly blinked away. Home. When had that become possible? Transport coordinates received, Santos announced. Zara walked to the transporter pad, pausing only to look back at Captain Chen. If your electromagnetic pulse plan fails, remember Thek 7's weakness is his predictability. He will always choose the direct approach over the clever one. Noted, Chen replied. Bring him back alive if you can. I will do what I must. The transporter beam enveloped her and Zara felt herself dissolving into light and possibility. When the universe reassembled around her, she stood in the cargo bay of the Relentless Wind, facing the assembled crew of her former ship. Their eyes held nothing but contempt and disgust, the look reserved for traitors and oath-breakers. Captain Thek 7 waited in the center of the bay, ceremonial combat blade already in hand. The weapon was ancient, passed down through generations of Kalrani warriors, its edge honed to molecular sharpness. Choose your weapon, he said formally. Zara surveyed the rack of traditional blades, then selected a simple combat knife, the same type she had carried as a junior officer, before politics and ambition had complicated her life. It felt familiar in her hand, an old friend greeting her one final time. Begin, Thek 7 commanded. The duel was brief and brutal. Thek 7 was skilled, but age had slowed his reflexes while anger made him careless. Zara fought with the desperate efficiency of someone who had already lost everything and had nothing left to fear. When it ended, she stood over her former captain's body, breathing hard and bleeding from a dozen minor wounds. The Kalrani crew stared at her in shock. By ancient law, she had won the right to command their ship, but nobody seemed quite sure what to do with a traitor who had just become their legal superior. Communications, Zara ordered, her voice carrying the authority of command. Open a channel to the Defiance. The bridge of the human ship appeared on screen, showing Captain Chen and his crew watching anxiously for news. Captain Chen, Zara said formally, I have fulfilled the terms of our agreement. You and your ship are free to go. Chen's relief was visible, but his eyes were sharp with concern. What about you? Zara looked around the bridge of the Relentless Wind, meeting the eyes of crew members who had once been her colleagues. Some showed hatred, others confusion, but a few, just a few, showed something that might have been respect. I have a ship to command, she said, and perhaps a people to change. The transmission ended, leaving her alone with the consequences of her choices. Outside the viewports, she could see the Defiance powering up its engines, preparing to jump to safety with its cargo of rescued civilians. They would spread word of what had happened here, the story of a Kalrani who chose mercy over duty, and humans who chose acceptance over revenge. Command of the Relentless Wind proved to be far more complicated than Zara had anticipated. While ancient law gave her the right to lead, actually leading a crew that viewed her as a traitor required skills they had never taught at the Kalrani Military Academy. For the first week, she faced everything from passive resistance to outright insubordination, with several crew members requesting transfer to other ships rather than serve under her command. But gradually, something unexpected began to happen. The younger officers, those who had grown tired of the endless war and pointless slaughter, started to listen when she spoke of alternatives to blind obedience. The engine crews, who had always been treated as expendable, responded to her requests for efficiency improvements with something approaching enthusiasm. Even some of the veteran warriors began to grudgingly respect her tactical competence, if not her political choices. The real test came 3 weeks into her command, when Fleet Admiral Kes Prime himself arrived aboard the dreadnought Iron Talon for an inspection tour. Zara stood at attention in her cabin, now converted to a proper captain's quarters, as the Admiral studied her with the cold calculation of a predator evaluating prey. So, Kes Prime said finally, his voice like grinding metal. The traitor has convinced the High Command to legitimize her theft of a Republic warship. I won the ship according to ancient law, Zara replied carefully. The combat was witnessed by the entire crew. Ancient law. The Admiral's gill slits fluttered with contempt. Convenient how you invoke tradition when it serves your purpose, but abandon it when civilians need killing. Zara felt the familiar weight of accusation, but this time something had changed. The weeks aboard the Defiance had shown her a different way of thinking about duty and honor. She no longer saw compassion as weakness or mercy as contamination. I have served the Republic faithfully for 15 years, she said steadily. I have never questioned orders. Never failed in my duties, never shown anything but absolute loyalty. But when those orders required the murder of children, I chose a higher loyalty. To what? The human plague? To what we once were. Zara met the Admiral's gaze without flinching. Our ancestors fought for survival, for the right to exist among the stars. They never fought to exterminate innocent families seeking the same thing we once sought. Kes Prime moved closer, his presence filling the small cabin like a storm front. You speak of ancestors, traitor? Our ancestors would have torn you apart for such weakness. Our ancestors faced extinction and chose to become stronger, Zara countered. We face victory and choose to become monsters. Which path honors their memory? For a moment, violence hung in the air between them like a held breath. Then, unexpectedly, the Admiral laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that held no humor. You always were too clever for your own good, Vex 9. Very well. The High Command has decided to let this experiment continue for now. You will retain command of the Relentless Wind, but under strict conditions. Relief and apprehension warred in Zara's chest. What conditions? You will patrol Sector 9, hunting human raiders and protecting our supply convoys. Standard anti-piracy operations, but... The Admiral's eyes glittered with malice. You will do so without targeting civilian vessels or colonies. Let us see how effective the Great Reformer is when she cannot simply slaughter defenseless prey. Zara understood the trap immediately. Sector 9 was notorious for human guerrilla activity. Fast attack ships that struck supply convoys and disappeared into asteroid fields before Republic forces could respond. Previous commanders had dealt with the problem by devastating any human settlement in the area, reasoning that dead civilians couldn't support raiders. Without that option, she would be fighting a much more difficult campaign. I accept these conditions, she said formally. Of course you do. Report to Fleet Command weekly. And Zara? The Admiral paused at the cabin door. Failure will not be tolerated. If you cannot control human raiding in your sector within 6 months, you and your crew will be reassigned to punishment battalions on the Void Front. After the Admiral left, Zara sat alone in her cabin, contemplating the impossible task ahead. The Void Front was where the Republic sent officers they wanted to dispose of quietly, a meat grinder, where Calrani forces fought against incomprehensible alien horrors in the Galactic Rim. Assignment there was effectively a death sentence. But as she studied the tactical displays of Sector 9, an idea began to form. The humans were fighting for survival, using guerrilla tactics because they lacked the strength for conventional warfare. What if, instead of hunting them, she could find another way to stop the raids? Her first clue came 2 days later, when the Relentless Wind intercepted a human attack on a Republic supply convoy. Instead of opening fire immediately, Zara ordered her communications officer to broadcast on all frequencies. Human vessels. This is Captain Zara of the Calrani ship Relentless Wind. I wish to speak with your commander under flag of truce. The response came from the lead human ship, a converted freighter bristling with improvised weapons. Calrani vessel, we know who you are. The butcher of Kepler Station. The one who burned New Harmony. Why should we trust anything you say? Zara's blood chilled. She had been at Kepler Station, had participated in that assault. But New Harmony, she had never heard of any operation by that name. I was not at New Harmony, she said carefully. What happened there? As if you don't know. The human commander's voice was thick with pain and rage. Your people hit the colony 6 weeks ago. 8,000 dead, including the children's hospital. My daughter was in that hospital. Understanding crashed over Zara like a cold wave. The Admiral had given her this assignment knowing that human raiders in Sector 9 weren't fighting for conquest or glory. They were fighting for revenge against atrocities she had never committed but was being blamed for. Human. Commander, she said quietly, what is your name? Commander Sarah Mitchell, formerly of the Earth Defense Force. Now I'm just a mother looking for the monsters who killed my child. Commander Mitchell, I give you my word as a warrior that I had no part in the attack on New Harmony. But I believe I know who did, and I believe I can help you find them. The communications channel crackled with static as Mitchell considered the offer. Around them, both fleets maintained their positions, weapons trained on each other but not yet firing. What kind of help? Mitchell asked finally. The kind that gets us both what we want. You want justice for your people. I want to stop this war from turning us all into monsters. Meet me halfway and we might accomplish both. 3 hours later, Zara found herself sitting across from Sarah Mitchell in the neutral cargo bay of an abandoned mining station. The human commander was younger than she had expected, maybe 40 standard years. With graying hair and eyes that held depths of pain Zara recognized from her own mirror. "You're really her," Mitchell said, studying Zara's face. "The one who saved New Eden. How do you know about that?" "Word travels. There are humans alive today because you chose to do the right thing." Mitchell's expression softened slightly. "My husband was on one of the transports that escaped. He's been telling everyone who'll listen about the Calrani captain, who risked everything to warn them." Zara felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. "I did not know any had survived. 347 people made it out because of you. Their children will grow up free because of you." Mitchell leaned forward. "Now convince me that trusting you won't get the rest of my people killed." Over the next several hours, they worked out an arrangement that would have horrified both their governments. Zara would provide intelligence about Republic fleet movements and supply routes, allowing the human raiders to avoid unnecessary confrontations. In exchange, Mitchell would help identify the actual perpetrators of atrocities like New Harmony and provide proof of Republic war crimes to neutral governments. This could be considered treason by both our sides, Mitchell pointed out as they finalized their agreement. "Then we will be traitors together," Zara replied, "but we will be traitors in service of something better than endless war." As their ships parted ways, Zara felt a familiar sensation, the same sense of purpose and belonging she had experienced aboard the Defiance. She was building something new, one impossible alliance at a time. It would take months to see results, and the risks were enormous. But for the first time since her court-martial, Zara felt like she was moving towards something instead of just running away from her past. The war would continue, but perhaps it didn't have to consume everything in its path. Perhaps there was still hope for a future where children could grow up without learning to hate the stars themselves. 6 months later, Zara stood before the High Command Tribunal on Calran Prime, knowing that her words in the next few minutes would determine not just her fate, but the future of everything she had tried to build. The massive chamber echoed with the whispers of hundreds of officers, all gathered to witness what many expected to be her final disgrace. Fleet Admiral Kes Prime sat at the center of the tribunal, flanked by the most powerful military leaders in the Republic. His expression was smug with anticipated victory, but Zara detected something else beneath the surface: uncertainty. Her unorthodox methods in Sector 9 had produced results no one had expected. "Captain Zara," the Admiral began formally, "you were given command of the Relentless Wind with specific orders to eliminate human raiding in Sector 9. Your methods have been unconventional." "Yes, sir," Zara replied, standing at attention. "Explain to this tribunal how negotiating with terrorists serves Republic interests." Zara had prepared for this moment, but the weight of what she was about to reveal still felt staggering. "Admiral, with respect, the humans in Sector 9 were not terrorists. They were refugees seeking justice for war crimes committed by Republic forces." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Admiral Kes Prime's gill slits flared dangerously. "You dare accuse Republic forces of crimes?" "I accuse specific individuals of violating our own military code," Zara said steadily. She activated her personal communicator, projecting holographic evidence into the chamber. "These are recordings from the attack on New Harmony Colony. 8,000 civilians killed, including children in a medical facility, clearly marked with neutral status indicators." The recordings were damning. Republic ships deliberately targeting hospitals, schools, and residential areas while ignoring military installations. Even worse, the audio revealed officers laughing about the efficiency of their pest control operation. "This data is fabricated," Admiral Kes Prime snarled, but his voice lacked conviction. "The recordings were verified by our own intelligence division," Zara replied. "Furthermore, I have testimony from Republic personnel who participated in similar operations across 17 systems." She gestured, and new holograms appeared, statements from Calrani soldiers and officers who had grown sick of the systematic murder of innocents. Some had come forward after learning of her alliance with human refugees. Others had been quietly recording evidence for months, waiting for someone with the authority to act on their testimony. "The human raids in Sector 9 ceased," Zara continued, "because I addressed their legitimate grievances. When the perpetrators of the New Harmony massacre were identified and arrested, the raids stopped. When we began protecting civilian transports instead of destroying them, the guerrilla attacks ended. Admiral Kess Prime stood, his massive frame radiating fury. "You have exceeded your authority, Captain. You have no right to negotiate with the enemy." "What enemy?" Zara asked quietly. "The farmers trying to feed their families? The doctors treating wounded children? The teachers preserving their culture for future generations?" She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of officers who had spent years following orders without question. "When did we decide that every human in the galaxy was our enemy, regardless of their actions or intentions?" "They are not our species," another tribunal member interjected. "They compete for resources we need. So do the hegemony forces. So do the ethereals. So do dozens of other species we trade with regularly." Zara's voice carried across the chamber with growing strength. "Why are humans different? Because they remind us too much of ourselves?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around the chamber, Zara could see younger officers nodding slightly while older ones shifted uncomfortably. The war against humanity had lasted so long that many had forgotten how it started. Trade disputes and territorial conflicts that had escalated into genocide. "Admiral," Zara said, addressing Kess Prime directly, "I submit that our current strategy is not only morally bankrupt, but strategically flawed. We are creating martyrs faster than we can kill them. Every civilian transport we destroy produces 10 new human fighters. Every colony we glass turns neutral systems against us. What do you propose?" The question came from Admiral Voss II, the eldest member of the tribunal and one of the most respected strategists in the Republic. Zara took a breath, knowing that her next words would be seen as either visionary or treasonous. "Negotiated peace, recognition of human territorial claims in exchange for trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. We end this war not through victory, but through understanding." The chamber erupted in voices, some shouting support, others crying for her immediate execution. Through the chaos, Zara caught sight of familiar faces in the gallery. Captain Chen sat in the diplomatic section, having somehow convinced the Republic to grant him observer status. Beside him, Dr. Kim and several other crew members from the Defiance watched with obvious concern. "Silence." Admiral Voss II's voice cut through the noise like a blade. When order returned, he looked directly at Zara. "You ask us to forget centuries of military doctrine, Captain? To trust a species we have been taught to view as an existential threat? I ask you to remember what we were before fear made us cruel," Zara replied. "Our ancestors explored the galaxy seeking knowledge and wonder. When did we become conquerors instead of explorers?" The old admiral considered this for a long moment. Finally, he spoke again. "Your results in Sector 9 are undeniable. Raids have ceased, civilian casualties have dropped to zero, and shipping losses are at the lowest level in 15 years. But can this model be replicated elsewhere? It already has been." Zara activated another display showing tactical maps from across Republic space. 17 other commanders have adopted similar protocols. In every case, violence has decreased when we began treating human civilians as something other than target practice. Admiral Kess Prime slammed his fist on the tribunal bench. "This is madness. You would have us surrender to the human plague." "I would have us remember our honor," Zara shot back. "The same honor that led my ancestors to help the ethereals when their homeworld faced destruction. The same honor that formed the first interspecies trade alliances. The same honor that built the Republic in the first place." The tribunal chamber fell silent as her words echoed off the ancient walls. Around them, the carved symbols of the Republic's founding principles seemed to glow in the chamber's lighting. Justice, wisdom, strength, and unity. Principles that had been forgotten in the rush to eliminate a perceived threat. Admiral Voss II rose slowly, his great age evident in every movement. "This tribunal will recess for deliberation. Captain Zara, you will remain under guard pending our decision." As security officers moved to escort her from the chamber, Zara caught Captain Chen's eye. The human gave her a slight nod, approval and support from someone who understood the cost of standing up for principle. Whatever the tribunal decided, she had spoken her truth. The waiting was the hardest part. For 3 days, Zara remained in quarters under guard, while the most powerful beings in the Republic debated her fate. She used the time to write letters, to her crew aboard the Relentless Wind, to Commander Mitchell and the human refugees they had protected, to Captain Chen and the family she had found aboard the Defiance. When the tribunal reconvened, Admiral Voss II's expression was unreadable. The chamber was packed with military personnel, civilians, and diplomatic observers from dozens of species. The decision announced here would reshape the balance of power across the galaxy. Captain Zara, the old admiral began, this tribunal finds that your actions in Sector 9, while unprecedented, have served Republic interests and upheld the highest traditions of military honor. Relief flooded through Zara, but she kept her expression neutral. Furthermore, Admiral Voss II continued, the High Command has voted to implement your protocols as official policy across all Republic forces. Effective immediately, attacks on verified civilian targets are prohibited, and field commanders are authorized to negotiate local ceasefires with human forces willing to engage in good faith discussions. The chamber erupted in voices, some celebrating, others protesting. Admiral Kess Prime sat frozen in his chair, the architect of genocide watching his life's work crumble around him. However, Admiral Voss II's voice cut through the noise. These changes will require careful implementation and oversight. Therefore, you are hereby promoted to Fleet Admiral and given command of the new Diplomatic Operations Division. Zara felt the universe tilt around her. From traitor to Fleet Admiral in less than a year, it seemed impossible. Yet here she stood. Your first assignment, Admiral Voss II continued with something that might have been a smile, is to arrange formal peace negotiations with human leadership. The war that has consumed two species for so long must end. As the tribunal dissolved into celebration and recrimination, Zara found herself surrounded by well-wishers and reporters. Through the crowd, she saw Captain Chen approaching with his characteristic calm determination. Admiral, he said with a slight smile, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting, I believe we have some talking to do. Zara clasped his hand, feeling the weight of history and hope in that simple contact. Yes, she agreed. I think we do.